Welcome back to Raptor-One.
Raptor-One, Voyagers of the Stars. Season 2, Chapter 2, The Nebula's Veil. The Path Ahead. The nebula hung before them like a storm painted across the stars, vast curtains of violet and emerald gas, rippling with hidden currents of light. It pulsed faintly in resonance, as though the constellation itself had set its breath inside the clouds. Somewhere deep within lay their first radiant. The cockpit was quiet after the chaos of their first battle. Smoke still clung faintly to the vents, and the systems groaned as Varric forced them back into working order. The braid was raw, its threads scarred from the Autom's certainty. 7 voices tangled uneasily in the silence, unsure if they could hold together once more. Saran sat at the helm, eyes fixed on the shifting veil. "The Radiant is in there," they said softly. "The Constellation marked it. But a place like that, it doesn't let us through without a price." No one argued. They all felt it, the weight of trial waiting inside. The crew in unease. Tessa sat at her console, shard glowing faintly in her palms. The energy inside it hummed like a heartbeat, nervous but steady. She whispered, "The nebula isn't just light. It's memory. I can hear fragments, like whispers buried in fog." Darrow's laugh was short, sharp. He leaned against the gunner's chair, arms folded. "Whispers don't matter. What matters is what's hiding inside. If the Autom followed us this far, they'll be waiting in the clouds." Ira turned her wide, bright eyes to him. "Not everything in the dark is an enemy, Darrow. The Constellation sings here. It feels almost welcoming." "Or it feels like a trap," Chiron cut in, his tone edged and flat. His hood shadowed his expression, but suspicion pressed through the bond like a knife. "We don't know what else waits in there, and we've barely held together once. If we fracture again, it won't be Autom fire that kills us. It'll be ourselves." The words silenced the cabin. Even the hum of the ship seemed muted. Then Cyrus's drone buzzed, breaking the tension. He leaned back in his chair, voice smooth, almost theatrical, but laced with a new seriousness. "Billions are still watching. They don't need perfection. They need proof we won't collapse. Whatever's in that nebula, we give them a show of strength. If we stumble loud." Varric snorted, sparks popping from his arm as he twisted a coupling shut. "Or we stumble into silence. And streams don't matter much if we're dead." Saran let the voices flow. They did not cut them off, nor try to still the friction. Instead, they breathed deep, letting the doubt and the faith, the suspicion and the hope, braid inside their chest. This is what a captain is, they thought. Not one who silences, but one who carries. At last, they said, "We enter the veil." The nebula's embrace. The ship pierced the first shrouds of gas, and light swallowed them whole. The void beyond the glass became alive, violet clouds curling like tides, emerald streaks flashing like lightning in slow motion. The nebula was not still but moving, a sea of resonance alive with color and pulse. Inside, sensors flickered uselessly. Chiron cursed under his breath as his comms were drowned in static. Varric slammed his fist against the console, muttering, "Half my readings are gone. She doesn't want us seeing straight." Tessa pressed her shard close, her eyes unfocused. "Don't fight the fog. Listen to it. It's trying to guide us." Saran adjusted their grip on the yoke. "Then guide me, Tessa. We'll follow the song." And so the ship drifted deeper, guided not by maps or instruments, but by the hum of resonance carried through the braid. Ira's voice wove with Tessa's, their tones lifting together, charting a course that only they could sense. The vision. As the nebula deepened, light thickened into shapes, phantoms half-formed, faces flickering in the gas. They were not enemies, nor allies, but fragments of memory given shape. Lyra, Kale, Juno, their shadows drifted in the clouds, not speaking, but watching. The crew froze, breath stolen. Even Saran felt their hollow twist. Tessa whispered, trembling, "They're not gone. They're carried." The nebula remembers. But the Autumn's voice pressed faintly at the edges of the bond, even here, even now. Memory is error. Error will be erased. The faces began to waver, torn between song and silence. The first trial. The nebula darkened. Ahead, a massive formation of crystal drifted, like a shard grown to planetary scale, fractured but pulsing with a radiance-buried light. The braid tightened. Every voice in the crew knew this was the trial. To kindle the radiant, they would not face weapons or fleets, but themselves. Their fractures reflected back at them. Saran steadied their voice. "Whatever we see in there, we hold. We don't silence. We endure." And with that, Raptor-One slipped deeper into the veil, toward the heart of their first radiant. The chamber of glass. The nebula thickened until light itself seemed to solidify. Clouds parted around a vast crystalline hollow, a chamber suspended in the gas, shards of fractured crystal drifting in orbit around a pulsing core. The radiant lay dormant at its center, its glow faint and uneven, like a heartbeat struggling to rise. Raptor-One drifted into orbit of the crystalline hollow. The moment they crossed the threshold, resonance tore through the braid. Every console flickered, every shard burned, and every mind was pulled inward. The ship was gone. The nebula was gone. Only the radiant remained, and 7 voices cast into its memory. The fractured visions. The Radiance trial did not come as fire or battle. It came as reflection. Each crew member was torn into a memory, not their own, but shaped by their fracture. They saw themselves through the lens of the Constellation. Saran Vale. Saran stood in a silent command hall, the captain's chair before them. It was empty, waiting. Voices filled the chamber, Concord officers, family names, expectations stacked higher than the stars. You will sit, or you will break. Their hollow screamed. They had never asked for command, but here it was, demanded once again. The Radiant whispered, "Will you carry choice, or only wait?" Tessa. Tessa found herself holding shards, dozens, hundreds, all humming with voices. Some were kind, some were broken, some screamed with rage and grief. Her hands burned under the weight of them. A figure in the fog whispered, "You can't save them all. Which voices will you silence?" Her chest ached. She had always sworn that every shard, no matter how fractured, deserved to be heard. But now the Radiant pressed. Can you bear all of them, or will you shatter too? Darrow Core. Darrow stood on a battlefield littered with the dead. His squad, faces familiar, bodies broken. Smoke choked the sky. His rifle was slick with blood. A voice whispered, "You protected no one. You always fail." He roared against it, raising his weapon, but the more he fired, the more the bodies multiplied. The Radiant asked him, "Is loyalty only measured in survival, or in how fiercely you carry those who fall?" Chiron Solari. Chiron stood in an alliance chamber, files and codes glowing in the air around him. Secrets. Lies. He had served them once, believed their order. Now he was traitor to both sides, living in shadow. A whisper pressed at him. No one trusts you. You don't even trust yourself. When the bond fractures, will you betray them too? The Radiant's voice was quieter, but sharper. What truth do you serve? Ira mourned. Ira stood beneath a sky filled with infinite stars, every thread of the constellation glowing bright. She reached for them, laughing, and they reached back, until they began to unravel, threads snapping one by one into darkness. Her joy twisted to terror. She clutched at fading stars, tears on her face. The constellation abandons us. It's just lights in the void. The Radiant whispered, "Do you believe because it is real, or is it real because you believe?" Varric feigned. Varric awoke on a cold steel table, Autom machines grafting metal into his flesh. Pain lanced through his body, circuits burning under his skin. He tried to scream, but no sound came. The shadow of his own reflection leaned over him, half machine, half human. It said coldly, "You are theirs. You'll never be free." The Radiant cut deeper. Do you define yourself by their chains, or by how you broke them? Cyrus. Cyrus stood on a stage before billions of glowing faces. They chanted his name, cheered, screamed, but when he leaned forward, the cheers warped into static. Every screen flickered with a question. Are you real, or are you only the performance? The audience vanished, leaving him alone in silence. His drone hovered before him, its lens unblinking. The Radiant's voice asked, "If no one watched, would you still endure?" The choice of flame. The visions faded, and the seven found themselves standing together in the crystalline chamber. The Radiant pulsed before them, its fractures glowing faintly. Each one carried their trial inside their chest: doubt, fear, memory, fracture. But as they looked at each other, the bond pulsed. Imperfect, scarred, alive. Saran lifted their chin. We carry it all, not because we're flawless, because we endure. Tessa's voice was soft, but steady. No voice silenced. Darrow grunted, gripping his rifle tight. No fight abandoned. Chiron whispered, no truth denied. Ira smiled faintly, eyes wet. No star forgotten. Varric's arm hissed, but his voice was iron. No chain unbroken. And Cyrus, for once, spoke without showmanship. No song unwitnessed. The Radiant blazed. Fractures mended in light, shards singing. The nebula thundered with resonance, and the crew's braid steadied, not perfect, but enough. The Radiant's voice filled them. Flame kindled. Error endured. The song carries forward. After the trial, Raptor-One drifted from the nebula's heart, her systems alight with fresh power, her crew bound tighter than before. The first Radiant of Season 2 was theirs. But in the distance, the Autom stirred, their arcs already shifting toward the nebula. The silence would not wait. The nebula's veil stretched across the void like a living tapestry, sheets of violet gas folding into emerald tides, stars blinking like faint eyes hidden within the fog. As Raptor-One glided forward, her hull lights cut weak beams into the murk, swallowed almost instantly. The cockpit was hushed. The silence wasn't only the ship's, it belonged to the nebula itself. Every breath felt borrowed. Every word spoken felt too loud. Varric muttered at his console. Engines are steady, but readings are nonsense. Nebula's throwing the sensors into fits. We're blind in here. Not blind, Ira whispered, her eyes reflecting the swirling green light. The constellation is clearer than ever. It hums through the fog. Darrow grunted. You trust humming. I trust guns. And right now, I can't see what I'm supposed to shoot. Maybe that's the point, Tessa said softly. This isn't a fight we win with weapons. Chiron leaned into the comm station, his hood shadowing his face. Or maybe it's a trap, and we're drifting into a kill zone without even knowing it. Certainty cuts both ways. Saran said nothing. They kept their grips steady on the yoke, letting the voices weave and clash. Leadership wasn't command in moments like this. It was listening, carrying, and choosing. And the choice was forward. The first whispers. As they penetrated deeper, light thickened. Phantoms began to appear, faces carved out of mist and memory. Shadows of people half seen in the fog. A woman with fire in her eyes. A man clutching a rifle. Another laughing through pain. Saran's breath caught. Lyra. The braid shivered. They all saw them, the first crew of Raptor-One. Lyra, Kale, and Juno, drifting like ghosts within the nebula's folds. Their outlines glowed faint, as if remembered by the gas itself. They're not gone, Tessa whispered, tears glimmering. They're carried. This place remembers. But the Autumn's voice pressed cold and sharp into their bond. Memory is error. Error will be erased. The phantoms flickered, threatening to dissolve. Ira reached a hand toward the mist, her voice rising into the bond like a song. No, memory is flame. Flame endures. The faces steadied. The chamber of glass. The nebula opened into vast emptiness, and there it was, a crystalline hollow suspended in the gas. Shards of light the size of cities drifted around a pulsing core, fractured yet alive. The dormant radiant. The instant they crossed into orbit, resonance flared like fire through the braid. Every console shut down. Every light dimmed. The crew's body stiffened, and then the world dropped away. The ship vanished. The nebula vanished. Only the chamber remained, and the radiant, glowing faint, pulling them into its trial. The trials of 7. They stood apart now, each drawn into their own vision. Saran faced the captain's chair, empty, waiting. Voices of legacy echoed, demanding they sit, demanding they lead. The radiant whispered, "Do you lead because they ask, or because you choose?" Tessa held countless shards in her arms, their voices clashing, rage, grief, hope, silence. Her chest ached under the weight. The radiant pressed. If you cannot carry them all, do you silence the rest? Darrow stood on a battlefield of corpses, his squad falling again and again. Each time he fought harder, and each time more bodies fell. The radiant thundered. Is loyalty measured only by survival? Or in how fiercely you endure their memory? Chiron drowned in data, files, codes, secrets. Alliance lies pressed around him. A voice hissed, "You will betray them. You always do." The radiant asked, "What truth anchors you when shadows consume?" Iris stood beneath infinite stars unraveling into black. Her joy curdled to despair. The radiant whispered, "Do you believe because it is proven, or is belief itself the proof?" Varric was strapped to a cold table, autumn drills burning into his flesh. His reflection sneered at him. "You are theirs. You'll never be free." The radiant asked, "Do chains define you, or the act of breaking them?" Cyrus stood on stage before billions. Their cheers fractured into static. Every screen flickered. Are you real, or only the performance? The radiant demanded, "If no one watched, would you still endure?" The chorus. One by one, the vision shattered. The 7 returned to the crystalline hollow, the radiant pulsing before them. Fractures glowed faintly along its surface. Each carried their wound, but each spoke into the braid. Saran, we carry by choice, not demand. Tessa, no voice silenced. Darrow, no loyalty abandoned. Chiron, no truth denied. Ira, no star forgotten. Varric, no chain unbroken. Cyrus, no flame unwitnessed. The braid flared, messy but fierce, imperfect but alive. The radiant blazed, fractures sealed with light, resonance thundered through the nebula. Flame kindled. Error endured. The song carries forward. After the trial, Raptor-One reappeared, drifting in the nebula, her systems restored. The crew gasped as if surfacing from deep water, sweat slicking their skin, eyes raw with tears. The bond hummed differently now, less fragile, more woven. Saran exhaled. We endured. Ira wiped her face, smiling. The Constellation knew we could. Varric shook sparks from his arm, muttering, barely. Cyrus sat back, drone hovering. For once, his grin was thin, quiet. And billions watched every fracture. They saw us bleed, and still stand. That's the story they'll remember. But in the distance, alarms began to whisper. Chiron's comms lit with faint red signals at the edge of the nebula. The Autom had found them. The afterglow of the radiant. The radiant's light lingered in their bones long after its chamber dissolved. Raptor-One drifted on, engine steady but hushed, as though she too was listening to the fading resonance. In the cockpit, no one spoke at first. They sat in silence, catching their breath, hearts pounding from the trial. Their clothes clung with sweat, hands trembling faintly as the echoes of their visions replayed. It was Cyrus who broke the silence. His drone floated quietly at his side, lens dim, not broadcasting. For once, the billions were excluded. His voice was softer than the crew had ever heard. Did it ask you to? Who you really are? 7 pairs of eyes met, one by one. Each saw the answer reflected in the others, though no words were needed. The radiant had forced them all to face their fractures. Shared fractures. Saran leaned forward, elbows on their knees, voice low. It showed me the chair. Again, demanded I sit. Demanded I carry what I've spent my whole life trying to escape. Tessa whispered, clutching her shard. It gave me voices, so many voices. Too many to bear. I thought my compassion would shatter under them. Darrow's jaw tightened, his voice gruff. It gave me bodies. My squad, again and again. No matter what I did, they kept falling. Loyalty wasn't enough. Chiron sat in shadow, fingers tracing unseen patterns on the console. It drowned me in secrets. Reminded me I don't trust myself, let alone anyone else. Maybe it's right. Ira's eyes glistened as she smiled faintly. It showed me stars unraveling, the constellation going dark, and I had to ask myself, do I believe only when it's easy? Varric growled, sparks snapping from his cybernetic arm. I was back on the table. Autumn drills in my flesh. My reflection told me I was theirs forever. Maybe I still am. Finally, Cyrus lifted his chin, grin brittle. It showed me billions. All cheering, then vanishing. Asked me if I was anything without them. I don't know the answer yet. The chorus of imperfection. They sat in silence, their confessions drifting through the bond. For once, there was no argument, no clash. Just raw fracture, bared and shared. Saran spoke last, their voice steady despite the weight. The radiant asked us to endure. not as perfection, not as certainty, as fracture, as flame. That's all it demands. Tessa reached across the table, setting her shard gently between them. Its glow was small but steady, like an ember that refused to die. Then that's what we'll be. Imperfect, but together. The braid pulsed faintly, steadier now. Not harmonious, not flawless, but woven with acceptance. The nebula stirs. Suddenly, alarms flickered on Chiron's console. He sat upright, scanning the readouts. Contacts. Edge of the nebula. His tone was clipped, urgent. They found us. Red signatures pulsed faintly against the darkness of the gas. Autom scouts, their arcs forming with unnerving precision. Varric swore under his breath. Can't those machines give us one breath to breathe? Darrow was already strapping into his gunnery chair, hands steady on the controls. Good. I need something to shoot after all that philosophy. Ira's hand trembled, but her voice was clear. The Constellation isn't done with us. This trial isn't over. Saran straightened, hands closing firmly on the yoke. The radiant strength pulsed faint in their veins, enough to quiet the worst of their doubt. Then we fight, not as perfect, not as certain, as fracture. And Raptor-One turned toward the storm. The quiet return. The Radiant's light still shimmered faintly in the bond as Raptor-One drifted deeper into the nebula's folds. Systems were steady again, but the hum of the ship carried a different tone, less strained, almost reverent, as though she too had felt the radiant kindle. For the crew, the silence that followed was heavier than any autumn fire. They had survived their first trial together, but the visions lingered in the marrow of each Voyager. The braid hummed with echoes of fear and revelation. None wanted to speak of it, and yet silence was its own burden. Saran finally broke it, their voice low, quiet. Galley, now, all of us. Gathered around the table. The mess hall was small, utilitarian, barely more than a metal chamber with a central table and the faint smell of heated ration packs. Yet, after the Radiance trial, it felt like a sanctuary. They gathered slowly, some reluctantly. Darrow was first, still radiating the tautness of battle readiness, but his heavy steps betrayed fatigue. Tessa carried her shard with her, cradled like a lantern, its glow soft but constant. Ira arrived with wide eyes, still awash in awe, as though part of her remained in the stars. Varric stomped in with sparks crackling faintly from his grafted arm, muttering about systems that wouldn't hold another fight like that. Chiron was last to sit, hood still shadowing his eyes, hands twitching as though he hadn't stopped running calculations since the visions. Cyrus entered with his drone floating silently above him, its lens dim. He'd turned off the stream. A rare moment when billions weren't watching. The table hummed faintly under their weight, and Saran placed their palms flat against it. No one leaves until we speak it. All of it, they said. Confessions. Silence lingered, brittle. Tessa was the first to whisper. The Radiant showed me voices, so many voices. Some I couldn't bear, some I wanted to push away. But if I silence even one, I lose myself. Ira reached across the table, her smile soft, steady. You didn't lose yourself. You carried them, all of them. That's why the Radiant answered. Darrow's fists tightened on the table. His voice came gravel deep. I saw my squad fall, over and over. No matter what I did, they kept dying. And all I could think was, loyalty doesn't matter if they're still dead. Varric met his eyes, grim. Loyalty doesn't keep them alive, but it keeps you standing when you'd rather break. That's what soldiers are. Chiron exhaled, long and slow, like he'd been holding it since the chamber. The Radiant called me a traitor. Reminded me I betrayed the Alliance, betrayed myself. Asked me what truth I serve. And the truth is, I don't know. Then find it, Saran said. Their tone wasn't sharp, but it was steady. Truth doesn't mean certainty. It means choosing what you stand for, even if it breaks you. Ira's voice trembled. It showed me stars unraveling, the constellation falling dark, and I was afraid that everything I believe is just a dream, that I believe because I want to. You believe, Tessa said gently, because the constellation sings through you. That's more than want. Varric's metallic hand clenched, circuit sparking. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning. I was back on the table. The drills. The chains. The voice telling me I'll never be free. Maybe it's right. Maybe I'll never be anything but broken. Saran met his gaze firmly. Chains don't define you. Breaking them does. You're here. That's proof enough. Finally, all eyes turned to Cyrus. He leaned back, his usual charm stripped raw. His drone hovered quietly, lens blank. His grin didn't come. It showed me the stage, billions screaming, and then silence. Asked me if I'm anything without them watching. His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't flinch. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just noise. Maybe without them, I disappear. Ira's hand brushed his. You didn't disappear in there. You stood beside us. Cyrus let out a shaky laugh, eyes glinting. And billions did watch me break. Guess that's real enough. A bond forged in flaws. The table was quiet again, but it was a different quiet. The confessions hung heavy, but not unshared. Fractures spoken aloud no longer weighed as much. They were carried together. The braid pulsed faintly, stronger than before. Imperfect, scarred, but woven tighter. Saran lifted their cup. We endure, not because we're flawless, because we're not. Tessa raised hers, to the voices carried. Darrow raised his, to the fallen remembered. Chiron's cup trembled, but he lifted it, to truths still found. Ira smiled, lifting hers, to the stars that remain. Varric growled, raising his cup, to chains broken. Cyrus's grin returned, thin but real, to noise that refuses silence. 7 cups clinked. The warning. The moment lingered like warmth after fire, but then Chiron's console pulsed with red light, bleeding into the bond like a wound. He rose, voice sharp. Autom scouts, closing in fast. The nebula shuddered, violet clouds twisting as arcs of red certainty pierced through the mist. The trial was over. The hunt had begun. After the meal, the clink of cups faded, and the warmth of the mess hall meal lingered like embers in the air. But exhaustion pulled at each of them, the aftershocks of the Radiant's trial still deep in their bones. Most drifted from the table in silence, splitting off into corners of the ship. It wasn't avoidance, it was necessity. Some fractures needed space before they could weave into the braid. Yet the ship's narrow halls and hum of systems drew them into smaller pairs, moments where words escaped that would have been swallowed in the group. Tessa and Varric, the weight of scars. Tessa found Varric in the engineering bay, crouched over a sparking panel. His cybernetic arm glowed faintly as he forced 2 conduits into place, jaw tight. Sparks hissed across his skin, but he didn't flinch. You shouldn't push it like that, she said gently, stepping closer. Even metal breaks if you strain it too hard. He shot her a look, sharp, but not cruel. You don't understand. If I stop, if I ease off, then I remember the table. The drills. Stopping means they win. Tessa reached into her pouch, drawing out her shard. Its light washed over his scars, softening the harsh metal sheen. You don't have to stop, but you don't have to fight it alone, either. For a long moment, he stared at the glow reflecting in his arm. His jaw worked, but no words came. Finally, he muttered, "Keep that light close, RHYN. Might be the only thing keeping this scrap pile moving." Tessa smiled faintly. "Then I will." Darrow and Ira, a soldier and a dreamer. In the observation alcove, Ira leaned against the glass, staring at the nebula's swirl outside. Her breath fogged the pain. "It's alive," she murmured. "The constellation breathes through every color, every shift." Darrow stood beside her, arms folded. His face was drawn, hard. "All I see is cover. Autumn could be anywhere in that mess." She looked at him, eyes soft. "You always see the fight first." "That's what keeps people alive," he replied, voice low. "Seeing the fight before it sees you." Her gaze drifted back to the nebula. "But if you only see battles, don't you miss the beauty worth protecting?" The question silenced him. His fists unclenched slowly. He didn't answer, but when Ira began sketching the nebula's light in her notebook, he watched, not the colors, but her steady hand. Chiron and Cyrus, shadow and spotlight. Chiron found Cyrus in the crew lounge, the streamer's drone hovering low, lens still dim. Cyrus lounged in a chair, staring at his empty hands as though trying to see himself in them. "No broadcast?" Chiron asked, voice sharp, almost accusing. Cyrus smirked weakly. "World's not ready to watch me sulk. Even I have limits." Chiron stepped closer, folding his arms. "Billions trust you because you make them forget their fear. But if you vanish when you're afraid, what truth does that show them?" The words cut sharper than Cyrus expected. He leaned back, grin brittle. "And what truth do you show, Shadow Mind? Hiding in your hood while telling me how to stand in the light?" For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Then, unexpectedly, Chiron chuckled, low, dry. "Maybe we're both pretending. You in the spotlight, me in the dark. But pretending can be useful." Cyrus blinked at him, then let out a real laugh, weary but free. "Maybe. Just don't steal my lines. I've got better delivery." Saran alone, the captain's burden. In the cockpit, Saran sat alone at the helm, staring at the nebula. Their reflection ghosted faintly on the glass, the empty captain's chair still etched in their mind. They touched the console, feeling the faint thrum of the Radiant's power running through the ship. For the first time since taking command, they let themselves whisper the truth aloud. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." The bond didn't answer, but the hum of Raptor-One did. Steady, enduring. Saran exhaled, shoulders loosening. "Then I'll learn." The veil holds its breath. The ship drifted on, carrying 7 souls who were still strangers, still fractured, yet inching closer through the weight of trials shared. In the nebula's heart, the Radiant's light still shimmered faintly, as if blessing their fragile braid. But at the edges, Autumn's certainty was already pressing closer, red arcs like knives slipping into fog. The respite was ending.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to be notified about upcoming releases to the Raptor-One series, please subscribe. This has been a Bad Karma Drone production.